Hey everyone, this is Ifetayo Ojelade. I am here with my sister friend Zawadi, and we are going to jump into a conversation today. Was kind enough to agree to come on and talk with me. We are getting ready for June 12th, which we will be doing our workshop, The Ethics of Integrating Alternative Healing Practices into Therapy, and Zawadi will be one of our speakers. And so I am just happy that she is here today. This is an amazing woman. She has a beautiful spirit and a very giving spirit. And so thank you for coming, Zawadi.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
So let me tell you a little bit about Zawadi. Zawadi and I met at a professional conference for psychologists, and because she presents there every year, and Zawadi is, in my terminology, what we would call a medium. And I will get into more about my thoughts about that when I first met her and how sweet she was to me. But I want to start out with just asking a question, Zawadi. Can you tell us what a medium is?
Yes, absolutely. So a medium is someone who connects with the spirit realm in such a way that they actually carry spirit, serving as a vessel so that different spirits can speak through that person and have access to the physical realm. Um, there are all kinds of mediums in the world, most of them who are able to do it successfully have psychic gifts and can get information from the other realm. I think mediums and psychics are slightly different because the information that I receive in particular is because of a gift of clairaudience, which means that either I hear the information or my guide hears the information, and then I carry the spirit and I relay the information to the person who's needing help.
So, what's the difference between clairaudience and clairvoyance?
I think clairvoyance has to do with vision, like you see visions, or you're sort of you're receiving messages almost like in your imagination. Whereas clairaudience, you actually hear the messages in your mind. It comes with as words, and so I think that that's mostly the skill that we work with.
Okay. And then, what's the difference between a medium and a psychic?
So what we like to talk about is the existence of sort of a spiritual internet, which is like all of the energy of the world kind of moving between us and being available. You hear people talk about the Akashic records and how there's kind of like information that exists on in an energetic realm that people can't access. So I believe that psychics, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not an expert on psychics, I believe that psychics access things like the Akashic records or what I call the spiritual internet. They just kind of tap into the information, speaking in their own voice with their own, sensibilities about them as themselves. A medium, we are carrying another entity. So me, for example, I carry a man named Adekemi who borrows my voice and relays this information to people through my voice, which turns into his voice, but through my vocal cords. And the information that people usually come to get from a medium have a lot to do with the things that are going on in their life. Oftentimes, similar to the counseling they would get from a psychologist, but of course, we don't have the expertise that psychologists have, so we don't have the ability to delve deeper, but we do have the ability to tap into sort of this spiritual realm that carries some of the information that maybe they have not even considered yet.
So, when I think about all of this, like before I met you, and I never believed. You heard me say this before. I did not believe in mediums. I thought they're all like scam artists, and like hanging out those little tarot card signs that flash, in front of somebody's house and
Right.
people's money. Because I honestly had not had the experience that I had when I interacted with you. It So when I think about this stuff, it sounds a little, it sounds unreasonable,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for our society that we live in. What would you tell somebody to help them understand that you are actually interacting with a spirit or carrying a spirit versus that this is a hustle or you may have some kind of mental illness?
Well, I want to invite people to deal with whatever reality they deal with. It doesn't make me, I'm not in the business of convincing people that mediums or psychics are real. Um, I will say that this tradition exists all over the world, and it has been used for centuries to get information and insight into people's lives and people's spiritual journey in the world. Um, I really would just tell them that they really shouldn't judge something until they try it. And they should not judge things that they've tried on the first try. Because, of course,
Like
you
me.
know, I know so many people who don't believe in psychologists, and they go to a psychologist who happens to be a bad psychologist, and then they swear off psychologists for the rest of their life. And I'm constantly advising people that no, just because you had a bad experience with a psychologist, does not mean that all of them will not work well for you. And so I think that in this society as Americans, we definitely have a McDonald's mentality. And we think that, we're supposed to get everything immediately without doing any work or having to have any faith or having to try anything that's outside of our comfort zone. And so, I mean, if people want to believe that it's, not real or it doesn't, fit into their reality, then, that's perfectly fine. Don't call me, don't look for me. But if you want to experience something that's different or to try something different, then, I think that you'll be really amazed and fascinated at how spirituality can work together with counseling to help people.
What I think is dope, your attitude is like basically you don't believe it, get to stepping.
Yeah, because there are some people who are not supposed to. I really believe that everyone is on their own evolutionary path, and everyone has a right to their form of spirituality and their level of belief, and the things that we are meant to encounter in our path, they come to us, and the things we are not, we reject them. And so, if someone is rejecting my practice, then maybe it's not for them, and I feel like that that's the right thing for them to do.
Okay, I love that because it's like no apologies. This is who I am. That's it.
No, it's just it's the truth. It's
I
just
ain't
the
mad at a sister. Not mad at you. When I first got a reading from you, so I only had one reading, but when I got that reading from you, I remember, and I think I told you this before, that I was like real scared. But something like immediately told me that I needed to do it, and I was scared, and I already was like, I'm not feeling this. I don't believe in mediums. But my colleague kept telling me about you. Like I heard about you for probably like 2 years before I actually met you. And then we happened to be at AB Sci together. And I didn't know that you came to AB Sci. I didn't know you had been presenting at AB Sci. So when I heard there was another psychologist was standing there with us, and she came, and she somebody that I really respect, and she came out and she was like, "That was dope." And she started, there was this lady, and she was in there, and she was manifesting in spirit, and she was talking about Adikami, and then something was said to me like really clearly, you need to do this. And I remember like you come into my hotel room, and what's hilarious is I always have my own hotel room, but that particular day, that particular conference, there was multiple people that were in my room, and so they were there witnessing it too. And about like the second sentence, I was like, "Oh shoot, this is real." It threw me off. So what you said about like if that's on your particular path, then that's the thing that you'll show up with. Because I was adamant, and I would like my colleague would say it over and over again. You need to meet Zawadi, and I would just ignore her. Like I would say, be smile and be nice, but I would ignore her. But when I sat with you, I was like, oh my god, it was something that's so different than anything that I would have expected to
Mhm.
experience. when you have people that have like those first time experiences like that, um, have you had people that were like afraid of it and like said it to you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had some people who were nervous, afraid. I have someone is bringing their mother next week, and she's really afraid because she's never experienced anything like that, and she's of the Christian faith, and so she, she's even been taught that it's wrong or that it's a sin or something of that nature. But normally, what happens is that the people will come afraid or nervous or not knowing what to do, and then once we get into the session, they don't want it to stop, and then we have time issues, and they want to come back again next week. And so it's pretty interesting how people once they experience it, their whole perception, I think, of reality changes. And we've received comments of it being life-changing. It blew my mind. It changed my whole perspective on everything. Because I really think that when you sort of experience something that is authentic to the other reality that exists and confirms for you that there is more than this one-dimensional world, it does actually change, your whole sensibility about life, and all of the issues that you perceive to be so all-encompassing and difficult in your life seem really small, and it just gives you a completely different handle on things.
Do you think that there is a difference in how people perceive or receive you as an African American woman and a medium? Because I see like the Long Island medium, she's got a whole show, and then you've got like Esther and Jerry Hicks, who and Esther manifests Abraham. And I had been listening to their stuff for a while, and then after I met you, I was like, oh, that's what Zawadi does. And so they have big audiences. So I wonder if there's a disparity in how you are received.
I have grown up around the Ifa tradition probably since I was a teenager, and we saw many, many mediums. It's a normal thing in our tradition, and so I think that the difference may not necessarily be. Well, I can't say how the society perceives it. I think that I can say for myself, my goal is slightly different. I'm not necessarily interested in being a medium to be on national television. I see it as part of my traditional religious practice, and it's something that's sacred. And so I think that perhaps other people may have that goal, to be on national TV and reach as many people as possible in large crowds and have fame and fortune. But the mediums that I've encountered in my life in the Ifa tradition, who have been mostly African Americans, that's not really what we're interested in. We're interested in giving life to the spirit world in this realm and helping each person as much as we can, one by one, and adequately carrying the tradition. And so, being African American, I'm sure that there are things, in every area that, where we're not treated fairly. But I can say for myself that I haven't looked for the things that Esther Hicks has looked for because it's not my objective.
So you talked about Adikami as one of the spirits that you manifest. Are there other spirits?
When I received Adikami, I received 7 other spirits. And I just kind of saw them, I sort of had a vision where I saw these faces would come before my face and say their name and then go and pass. And then the next one would come and say their name. And I was at a shrine at the time, so I knew that it was, real, that it was part of what I was practicing. And I have carried maybe 5 of them. But at some point I decided that in order to sort of focus and have more control over what I was doing, that I only wanted to work with Adekemi. And so I have slowly started to carry another spirit named Mahawa, who is a First Nations woman. I believe she's one of my ancestors. But I'm not interested in carrying a whole lot of spirits because, of course, when you build a relationship with spirit, you are constantly interacting with them during the day. And it's almost like, in your practice as a psychologist, maybe you would have other psychologists working with you. You could decide to work with one, or you could decide to work with five. The more that you add to your practice, the more you have to cultivate the relationship and the negotiations and, manage and monitor. And so in my practice with spirits, each of them is a person who just doesn't happen to have a body. And so in order to make my life easier, because I do have children, I decided that I would just limit my practice to the spirit that I trusted the most and who was most, genteel and diplomatic and charming. And, he's sort of, everyone likes him and trusts him. So I trust him as well.
Adikemi, that sounds like a name of someone of African descent. And you said you have Mahawa, which is a First Nations woman. Do you have the other spirits that you talked about? Are they of other ethnic groups?
Yeah, there's a man who's I believe he's Chinese.
Oh, wow.
And then another man who's also from the Congo. There's a West Indian woman. There's another First Nations man. Yes, I have. And then recently we've been getting messages from people from Ireland. So I think that maybe the spirits that come to me also mirror my ethnicity, because I do have all of those different bloodlines. And some of them are connected to my ancestry. So some of them are actually ancestors from many, generations ago who have decided to come back and speak.
So one of the things I have begun to think is like, I like how you described it as the internet. Like there are these different portals, and not everybody is paying attention. So when someone is paying attention, then the spirits are like, "Hey, the Wadi is paying attention. She can hear."
Well, some of it has to do with paying attention. Some of it has to do with some kind of a spiritual ability, because there are those who sometimes work really hard and do all kinds of initiations and pay all kinds of money in order to be able to channel spirits, but still cannot, because for whatever reason, they're not meant to do that in this life. So I think some people are just, myself, I was just born as a vessel. I've always carried spirits unknowingly, have always had personality shifts, voice shifts, accent shifts, energies, around me that weren't my own, that I was influenced by. And I have all kinds, that's a whole nother conversation. But some people are born with different gifts. And so some people, some people channel, through the arts. You can see dancers who, once they get on stage, they're no longer themselves. Painters who paint things and they're not sure where it came from. They'll tell you themselves, I didn't do it. I don't know where it came from. It must have come from God. Speakers, actors, and actresses sometimes are mediums. So I think that everyone expresses their spirituality in different ways, and some people are able to connect with spirit entities and then channel them. It's amazing. It's pretty amazing once we open our eyes and start to recognize the connection to those who have passed on and the energetic world, and the ways that those things can affect us. We've just had people who have experienced amazing life changes. One girl comes to mind in particular who was struggling with the spirit realm and having just really bad luck and strange voices, and just everything she did was sort of sabotaged in one way or another. And, after, connecting with her spirituality and, coming to speak with us for reading and also going to do other ritualistic things, her life has completely turned around. She's running a successful business, a salon in the middle of Harlem. She's, has a baby and a partner. She's been able to just like completely change her whole life around. And as a result, her whole attitude towards life has also switched. And I think that if we were to talk to her, she would say that there were things going on in the other realm that were causing her to experience, disappointment and discomfort in this realm, which was, it's like a whole spiral effect. And so, I just think that, being American and becoming westernized, even the Europeans who have been westernized have sort of been taught to strip away any semblance of mystical spirituality in order to be able to participate in this society. And that is causing quite a lot of illness and dissension and unbalance in people. And so, sometimes when the mental part cannot be fixed is because maybe the spiritual part has to be fixed.
I know I already said it was my last question, but I just got to ask one more because you keep saying this, and I'm like, oh, this. I know people will look at this and they'll be like, well, why don't you ask? So I'm going to ask. I guess if you could give me a brief answer on how do you know the difference between someone that is actually authentically connecting with the spirit realm and versus someone who has a mental illness?
So I've seen, like, it's almost like there's a spectrum of that type of thing in the world. It's like there's no one answer for that, because what I'm seeing with the people that I deal with is that sometimes the two things exist hand in hand. So I had one client who was hearing voices, and abusive voices from his ancestors, and had also experienced trauma in his childhood of abuse from family members. So from my perspective, the living family and also the family that had passed away were all abusive and, had learned these things, from slavery and from all the oppression and, difficulty they'd gone through. And they were passing it on to him, both in the physical realm and in the spiritual realm. And so he was in need of sort of like a cleansing of the spirit realm and also long-term counseling to rid himself of the trauma from this physical life. And so the two things were playing off of each other, because as I tried to get him to let go of these spirits that were tormenting him, he was holding on to a victim mentality and would not do the things I told him to do in order to rid himself of that experience. And so in that case, it was like both things. Like the person had, some mental stuff going on, and the person also had some spiritual stuff going on. And I knew the spiritual stuff was real because, as I like to tell people, I always do a 3-way check, right? So if someone's hearing voices, you have to, I often pray for more signs. I often pray for more confirmation about the voices. So with that one in particular, he reported that he was hearing voices. And over time, I started to ask for proof that these things were real. And I was also able to experience, to also hear the things that he was hearing separate from him. And then we also, I can't remember what was the third bit of evidence. But there was like a couple of different ways that we figured out that he wasn't just imagining. I was talking to him one day and he was saying that someone was accosting him, and then I felt like something pushed me. And I was like, wow, this is like really something. So, and of course, for other people that may sound like, I'm crazy and he's crazy, and they have every right to believe that. But in my reality, that is evidence that this is actually happening to him. It's really hard to prove that someone is experiencing what they're experiencing if it is a spiritual thing. And a lot of the work that I do is intuitive. So we really, to be honest, we haven't come up with a scientific way of finding evidence, to answer that question.
See, I thought I had an answer. That was my dissertation work. And like I was interviewing all these people, interviewing Ifa priests and interviewing people that went to Ifa priests. And for me, the line in the sand was when people started hearing negative voices. So then I was like, oh no, so then that's psychosis. And then I started hearing other stories of no, people could hear negative voices and it wouldn't necessarily be psychosis.
Right.
And
so I was told there were some people in Ghana who were studying mediumship and whether it was psychosis or a spiritual gift. And what they were finding was that the people who they defined as mediums were experiencing positive voices, whereas the people who were seen as psychotic were experiencing negative voices. But from their perspective, both of those were spiritual experiences. It's just that one of them had to be corrected, whereas the other one was actually helpful to the people. And so I don't know. It's really something that I can't answer, because I myself often wonder whether there is an actual physical reason for people hearing voices, like chemical imbalance or, some kind of part of the brain. But then even that can be argued to be of a spiritual element.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. For me, and I mean, this doesn't work for everybody. For me, I remember sitting across from you in that hotel room and Adekemi's voice came out of you. And I was like, that's a woman and it's a man's voice coming out of her. Like, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be happening. And he said, and then what made it even better is because you didn't know me, and it wouldn't have been like, so my aunt introduces us, but she didn't have time because it was so spontaneous. I did everything so spontaneous. There was no time for, somebody to tell you anything about me. So you come in, this man's voice come out of you, and like sentence 2, it was stuff that had to do with me. And I was like, wow. And I remember the key moment that like really solidified it for me. But like I said, when you first start talking, when Adekemi first started talking, so big ups to Adekemi, then I knew it was real. But at the very end, so you told me to think about the questions that I wanted to ask, and ask my ancestors before you got there, ask my ancestors for guidance. And so I had, a list of 3 or 4 questions or something like that. And Adekemi answered the questions. I never said anything out of my mouth. So then he looks at me and says, what questions do you have? And I'm thinking, I got no questions because he answered them all.
Yeah, he does that a lot. That's really common for people to say. It's pretty amazing. It definitely blows my mind every time. I think my favorite one was the girl who he told her, "You're pregnant." And she said, "No, I'm not. I can't be. That's impossible. I don't even like that guy that I slept with." And he said, "No, we're pregnant." She denied it for about, a week or 2. And then she went and took the test. And she called me. She said, "Zawadi." Like, what? my goodness, he did it again.
Well, and I think when you're open, that's the big thing, is like being open to another reality and not being so arrogant to think that just the reality that you experience is the only reality. That's, I think, was my saving grace.
Right.
Because I told you, like 20 years before, I had gone to the medium, and the first thing that the lady told me, that she said, "Oh, you have Native American in you," and I was like, "That lady is full of shit. I ain't got no Native American." And I was so upset because I just felt like that woman stole my money. And I held that for all of that time, and really, like, for 20 years was just like, those are just scam artists. And you know what made it worse is that she was like drinking some gin or some liquor while she was doing that reading.
Oh my goodness.
And like, it was terrible. And then she had this like turkey feather or whatever. I still have it. It's over there. She had this turkey feather and she gave it to me. And she was like, "Oh, where do you put this?" And I was just like, oh, I was totally dismissive. I was in my early 20s. And so that's the thing that shut me down to mediums. So when I sat with you and Adekemi, and he asked me what questions I had, and I didn't have no more questions, so I make up a question. And so I'm asking about my great grandmother, who is the only person I can't find any information on. And I remember he looked down and then he looked up. He's like, "Oh, she has native blood." And I remember saying, "Oh, shit." And I had to like catch myself. Because at that point, by 20 years later, I did know, yes, that I descend from First Nations people, and she was a First Nations woman. So that was the thing. It was like these very interesting bookends for me to have that experience. So this woman 20 years ago did know what she was talking about, but my ego and arrogance and thinking that I knew everything did not allow me to be able to hear it.
Right.
So 20 years later, I could hear it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we do have to be careful of people who are con artists. There's a lot of them in the world and everywhere, right? I mean, we see them, in every field, but also the other thing is that what I've noticed is that people's readings are only as good as they allow them to be. So when people don't open or don't allow themselves to believe in what we're doing, they should not come and see us, because it will not work, because they have so many energetic walls up that we can't even access the information, or, there are no spirits speaking. They have pretty much frozen the session. And it's only when people do open and allow, because it has to be permissible, it has to be, there has to be an agreement between us and them and their ancestors in order for us to even do a reading. And so I think that, on any spiritual path and in seeking any spiritual help, being open is everything, because otherwise it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Zawadi, for coming and showing up and having this conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So again, on June 12th, Zawadi will be with us, and she's going to talk a lot more about this, and I'm going to dive in, and I'm sure you have tons of questions for her. I'm going to ask a ton more stuff, and then we'll get into like what this really looks like if you're a mental health professional and you are working with clients that go to mediums, then being able to understand what that process might be for that client. And so if you are interested, there's 2 ways to be able to register. One is go to atlantacontinuingeducation.com. The other one is on my website, which is my full name, Ifetayo Ojelade.com. I'll put it in the description. I hope to see you on June 12th. Take care.